Hey, what's happening, everyone? It is I, the man, the myth, the mustache, Tim here, and I've got a brand new video for you. Welcome to part 6 of What If Deku Had a Full Counter Quirk. Please sit back and relax because you are in for a treat. With that out of the way, let's get this story going, shall we? The hero 13 stood outside of a large building, excitedly explaining to the students what would be happening. Welcome, students, to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. You'll be learning how to best utilize your quirks in a variety of disaster situations, from rock slides to floods to fires. Does anyone have any questions? Class 1A was excited about this change of pace in their heroics education. The massive dome structure was filled with a variety of disaster situations, all isolated in their own stages. Midoriya raised his hand. What exactly is the difference between disaster training and regular quirk training? 13 happily replied. Oh, that's a good one. Let me explain. My quirk is called Black Hole, and I could end up hurting a lot of people with it if I'm not careful. Without proper training, you could easily kill someone, even when you have the best of intentions. So, you must be wary about how you use your quirks when it comes to protecting and saving others. Now, shall we get started? Before their training could begin, a sinister dark purple mist formed in the center of the USJ. The students were confused and unaware until their teacher put on his goggles. This wasn't part of the training. Those were real villains. Aizawa ordered 13 to get the students out before jumping into action. Midoriya couldn't help himself from watching his teacher fight before someone began pulling his arm. It was Todoroki. Izuku, now's not the time for analytics. Right. Sorry. The cousins ran to catch up with their class. This invasion seemed thoroughly planned out. One of the villains must have taken out the power. Alarms should be going off by now, alerting the main campus that something was wrong. The dark mist from before blocked the path to the exit. 13 stood between the villain and her students as a pair of bright yellow eyes glared at them. We are the League of Villains. We've let ourselves into the den of heroism to kill All Might. I don't see him here, so it seems we'll have to kill you all one by one as we wait for his arrival. Not on my watch! The space hero activated her quirk, causing a black hole to form in front of the mist-like villain. His body became intertwined with the vortex as more and more of his figure got turned to dust. The sound of the metal doors closing resonated throughout the space. Yaoyorozu had an idea. Ida, you need to get back to UA and get the other teachers. What? I just can't abandon my class. Kaminari chimed in. Dude, we won't survive this on our own. Yaoyorozu continued. You're also the only one fast enough to do this. Painful cries drew the students' attention. The villain had used a warp gate to turn 13's quirk against her. The space hero's vision became blurred as she collapsed into unconsciousness. You hero types. Always such a cocky bunch. Midoriya and Bakugo were mad. You bastard! Both Bakugo and Midoriya were ready to throw hands with Kurogiri. Todoroki held his cousin back, knowing that they stood little chance against a real villain. Kirishima, on the other hand, charged into battle with Bakugo. The spiky-haired students attacked the villain. The doors were closing and they were running out of time. Some of the other students joined the fight to give Ida the opening he needed. Ida wouldn't let their efforts be in vain. He ran full throttle for the doors. Kurogiri manipulated his mask to block the way, but Sato and Shoji impeded his efforts. The brief scraping of metal on metal was heard as the vice rep forced his way outside. The metal door closed with Class 1A's only hope on the outside. How annoying, but it doesn't matter. By the time pro heroes show up, all they will find are your broken cadavers scattered about this place. A maelstrom picked up as the dark clouds consumed Class 1A. Midoriya tried his best to stay on the ground and hang on to Todoroki, but both efforts proved fruitless. The green-haired boy was tossed around like a cow in a twister before falling into a body of water. He didn't have time to fully orient himself before aquatic-based villains began to swarm him. Midoriya would have been shark bait had Tsuyu not shown up, a fearful Mineta under her arm. The trio sought refuge on a boat nearby. While Mineta panicked and cried, Midoriya and Tsuyu put their heads together to form an escape plan. While the students were fighting for their lives across the USJ, the D-list villains the League hired were being overwhelmed by UA's resident Insomniac. It was a beautiful display of martial prowess and quirk control as Aizawa tossed the baddies around with his capture tool. Seeing his army get decimated so easily pissed Shigaraki off. He began to scratch at his neck in frustration. A gentle hand laid on his hand, causing Shigaraki to stop tearing up his neck. Calm yourself, Tamura. We still have the Nomu at our disposal, and I'm always ready to fight for you. Shigaraki looked at Yitzuma for a moment before returning his gaze to Eraserhead. The young man took a breath before a wicked smile came across his face.
Yitzuma, give the hero a boss battle he'll never forget.
Whatever villains were still standing ran away as a woman with long pink hair floated towards Aizawa. The UA teacher wasn't sure what to make of this new opponent, but he was on guard all the same. That was a wonderful performance you put on for us, Eraserhead. You truly are as impressive as I was told. You're also rather charming, in a rugged kind of way. Aizawa didn't give the confusing remark a response. He adjusted his grip on his binding scarf as he sized up the strange woman. Oh my, how rude of me. I haven't introduced myself yet. I am Yitzuma. I hope you weren't too attached to the students of yours, because you'll never see them again. Anything untethered to the ground rose as Yitzuma lifted her hands. Aizawa danced and dodged the oncoming attacks to the best of his ability. The pro hero took advantage of the oncoming attacks, grabbing onto some of the smaller objects with his scarf and flinging them back at the villain. Yitzuma drifted and psychically manipulated the returned attacks, seemingly calm and unfazed. Based on what Aizawa had observed, the psychic villain hadn't been in many fights before. Her quirk was powerful, that was undeniable, but she didn't look physically capable. Aizawa began closing the gap between himself and Yitzuma. It couldn't be easy throwing stones when your target was right in your face. Aizawa jumped off the rubble that Yitzuma had thrown his way. The closer he got, the more rocks and boulders she threw. Aizawa simultaneously threw his capture tool as his eyes turned red. Yitzuma was quickly bound by the carbon fiber scarf as she stumbled to the ground. Her arsenal of projectiles fell. Her psychic abilities were gone. Aizawa cautiously approached, keeping his capture tool taut as he moved. He found it odd that Yitzuma wasn't struggling. You're not too bad yourself, albeit annoying and creepy. Yitzuma remained silent. What's the matter? A lot of pretty words to... A tendril-like length of Yitsuma's hair latched tightly around Aizawa's neck. More of the pink tresses bound around the pro hero's arms, legs, and torso. A pleasant smile was visible on Yitsuma's face, her eyes still obscured by her hair. She lifted her catch off the ground. Aizawa held fast, keeping Yitzuma and her non-mutation quirks contained. Don't take this personally, Eraserhead. I'd rather not hurt anyone. However, I have my orders, and the League is on a mission. Getting in our way would be quite detrimental to your health. Aizawa grit his teeth as the villain tightened her grip. His vision was becoming unfocused, and his lungs were burning. All of his choices were bad, but he made one all the same and blinked. Yitzuma spun Aizawa around in her hair as her quirk returned. She psychically removed the capture scarf from her, wrenching it from Aizawa's grip, before tossing it aside. She lifted herself off the ground and behind her captive, being careful to stay out of his line of sight. She noticed his wavering consciousness and loosened her hold around Aizawa's neck, surprising the pro hero as he gasped for air. Stay with me, Eraserhead. I'm not done with you yet. Her laugh was anything but innocent. Aizawa scanned his surroundings for anything that could give him the upper hand. His gaze landed on 3 of his students on the edge of the flood zone's pool. Midoriya was scowling, while Tsuyu and Mineta's expressions displayed fear. Aizawa wanted to yell at them to run away, but doing so would alert Yitzuma to their presence. The thought of his students having to face this kind of villain put knots in his stomach. Yitzuma began throwing Aizawa around like a rag doll, occasionally slamming him into the ground. She was keeping him disoriented and his vision obscured. Aizawa fought back the best he could, shaking from rage. Midoriya jumped from the water before Tsuyu pulled him back in.
Cool it, Midoriya. Your bull-headed brashness might have helped us get away from those villains, but that lady is giving Aizawa a hard time. I don't think we'd have a chance against her, Ribbit.
Athui's right. We need to get out of here, or hide until Ida comes back with the other teachers. I find your lack of faith disturbing, coward. The sting behind Midoriya's words stunned Asui and Mineta as strange green markings appeared on his face. This league of villains wasn't as prepared as we first thought. They don't know what quirks we have. If they did, they would have sent Suyu to the fire zone. Our teacher is in danger, and we have the element of surprise on our side. And I'll be damned if I'm just sit here doing nothing. Neither Suyu nor Mineta stopped Midoriya as he ran off. Midoriya didn't have a plan, but he believed, hoped in fact, he'd come up with something. He took a handful of darts from his belt and threw them at Yitzuma, boosting their speed with his quirk. Some missed completely, while a couple cut through her hair. One of the darts was going to hit her directly in the face, but the pink-haired woman grabbed it with her psychokinesis.
Run along, little boy. The adults are in the middle of something. This doesn't involve you.
Like hell it doesn't involve me! That's my teacher you're throwing around! Yitzuma absent-mindedly threw Aizawa aside, discarding him like an old toy. He skipped across the ground a couple of times before laying still. It was hard to tell if he was conscious.
I don't think your parents would approve of you picking fights, young man. Especially those you can't win.
My dad did that a lot of my age. Pretty sure it runs in the family.
Then it's a shame he'll have to make your funeral arrangements.
Yitzuma blasted the UA student with rubble. Midoriya dragon-stepped and countered what he could, only getting nicked and grazed by smaller pieces. The progress from all the years of tutelage with Hisashi and the 10 months of training were paying off. The jade-eyed teen even became bold enough to send Yitsuma's attacks back at her. Mineta watched the fight, slack-jawed and quaking in his knees. The short student caught movement from the corner of his eye. Athui, what are you doing?
I'm going to check on Aizawa. If he's still alive and conscious, he might be able to help.
But we thought Aizawa looted that lady. How can he help Midoriya after having that snot kicked out of him?
You know what? You're right. We should help Midoriya. Minoru Mineta, you want to attract hot women? Then save the day like a real hero.
Asui could only imagine what kind of lewd imagery was going through her classmate's head, and frankly, she didn't want to know. Mineta gathered all of his courage with an expression so stern and so serious, it could be confused with constipation. The young man armed himself with his quirk balls as his amphibious classmates slipped away. Although she was facing a foe, Yitzuma was holding back. She did not enjoy fighting children, but if it's to ensure the success of the mission, she would do what she must. And if that required sending a few children to the hospital, so be it. Besides, Yitzuma was a patient woman, and she enjoyed playing with her toys until they broke. Ire couldn't even begin to describe what Midoriya was feeling. He couldn't risk getting closer without getting in Yitsuma's hair-grabbing range, but none of his ranged attacks were connecting. The psychic woman would just throw them right back. Sure, Midoriya would be able to counter the attacks right back at her, but then they'd be stuck in a loop with neither of them gaining ground. It would be anyone's guess how long that would last before Midoriya would feel the pain of his quirk overuse or run out of stamina. From the distance came the cry of a warrior, one who would aid Midoriya in his battle for good. Purple balls were launched at Yitzuma. For the babes! The pink-haired lady turned her attention to the child, both disturbed and confused. The number of balls Yitzuma had to deflect was overwhelming, although more than half of them were missing. Midoriya began deflecting the balls that had gone off course back at Yitzuma, attacking her from two fronts. Becoming increasingly annoyed and frustrated by their antics, Yitzuma levitated herself higher until she was out of range of her opponents. She already had a multitude of strange purple balls stuck to her clothing and hair. A horrible feeling overcame Yitzuma as she began to fall. She glared at the source of her missing quirks. Aizawa had a cheeky grin on his face as his red eyes followed Yitsuma's fall. Asui stood proudly with the pro hero supporting Aizawa as he leaned on her. A small crater formed when Yitzuma hit the ground. Pain wrecked through the psychic villain's body. She tried to get up, but the adhesive of the purple balls was too strong. Yitzuma! Unfettered hate and rage filled within Shigaraki as he glared at the UA teacher and students. Kuragiri, Nomu, tear them limb from limb! With pleasure! The vengeful shadows rushed at Midoriya and Mineta. The two boys weren't foolish enough to willingly face this foe, but they saw no point in running. The ground quickly fell out from under the two students as they were swallowed by Kurogiri's quirk. The bird-faced monster called Nomu ran at them with great speed. There was no time to react, let alone run away. Aizawa and Asui were struck by a hulking mass, but it wasn't one that intended them harm. Attacking children and a defeated opponent are low-hanging fruit, even for a villain. Asui gazed up at the hero towering over her. Aizawa's burdens of the fight laid themselves to rest. All Might set the two of them down. Shigaraki began digging into his neck with the ire of a child on the verge of a tantrum. You and Aizawa get to safety. I'll take care of these scoundrels. Asui helped her teacher leave the battleground. Despite the sudden turnabout of the situation, Shigaraki was smiling. The bird-faced Nomu was designed to kill All Might. It would succeed in that mission, or die trying. The concept of direction no longer had meaning to Midoriya and Mineta as they fell through the looped warp gate. The wind screaming past them as they picked up speed. They were bound to reach terminal velocity if they hadn't already. Whether Kurogiri intended to keep them trapped like this or throw them somewhere, they needed to prepare themselves, both mentally and physically. Mineta, grab on! The tumbling teens grasped each other's hands tightly just as they were abruptly flung through the air. They were rocketing towards the side of the USJ's dome. Midoriya held his breath as he swept his arm at the wall with his quirk. The sudden change in their trajectory made their stomachs drop. The freckled teen did what he could to soften the fall, but they still crash-landed into the landslide zone. Midoriya stood, legs quaking from adrenaline, while Mineta emptied his guts. The jade-eyed teen looked in his surroundings quickly. He could see the central plaza from where he stood. Based on the heavy hits he could make out, All Might had probably arrived. Mineta, let's go! You can't be serious, right? Yes, I'm serious! We need to at least help out our classmates against any villains they're fighting. No way! I'm not gonna risk my life anymore today. I don't care how hot the babes are. I'm gonna hide until the teachers get here. Fine, you go hide. I'm gonna go kick ass. Midoriya ran off, leaving Mineta to his own devices. Todoroki was handling himself pretty well on his own against the small brigade of criminals. He found it underwhelming and almost wished he had more challenging opponents to face. And as though the gods were playing a practical joke on him, more baddies began sneaking behind the young hero in training. They saw their opening and began to strike. Midoriya charged in, striking two villains with a split kick before getting back-to-back with Todoroki. Hey, Izuku, what brings you here? Oh, I just thought I'd drop in. It sounds like All Might is here, but not the other teachers yet. Think we can hold out our own until then? Together? Definitely. The cousins fought their foes as fights continued around the USJ. Yitzuma could only glare from her prone position. She watched helplessly as the Nomu and All Might traded blows back and forth. The raw power behind each punch shook the air. Neither man nor beast was gaining ground. If the Nomu could get All Might closer to where she lay trapped, Yitzuma could aid in the symbol of peace's destruction. But fate wasn't in the League's favor that day. Distant movement and a subtle noise caught the psychic woman's attention. She used all of her strength to free herself, tearing her clothes and skin as she flew at top speed in front of Shigaraki. Gunshots rang out, 4 of them. Yitzuma tried to change the bullets' path, but they were moving too fast. 3 bullets slammed into Yitzuma, 1 in each shoulder and 1 in her hip. Her scream was brief as she went down. Shigaraki caught her, while Kurogiri put a warp gate between the oncoming fire and his companions. Yitzuma! Yitzuma! Wake up! She's in shock, Shigaraki. We must leave. But they have to die! I'm going to dust them for what they— Tamura! Kurogiri forced his young ward to look him in the eyes as the Shadow Man spoke with purpose, sympathy, and underlying rage. There will be another time for revenge. For now, we must regroup. I know that my sister would agree. Both men looked at their unconscious companion. Blood was starting to stain her clothes, and her breathing was rapid. Fine then. Leave the Nomu. We'll lose a valuable player, but it'll be a good distraction. The dark mist enveloped the League members, abandoning their failure of a mission. With the assistance of Midnight and Cementos, All Might was able to defeat and restrain the Nomu. 13 and Aizawa were taken in for medical attention. The space hero was critically hurt, and the 1A teacher had broken bones and internal bleeding, but both were in the best of care and were expected to recover. The students were rounded up, and thankfully, none of them had any major injuries. It was about then that Asui and Todoroki asked Midoriya about the markings on his face that had now disappeared. The green-haired boy was confused even after his friends described the markings to him. The marks were green, and looked similar to wet paint. And they were glowing. I first noticed them before you ran off. Really? That's never happened before. Memories of his grandparents' shrine and pictures of his mother came to mind. Could these have something to do with the Kitsune myth? He'd have to ask his father about this new development. And that's our video for today, so thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Before I go, there's a little bit of housekeeping I'd like to do. First, We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing pleasures. All the information you'll need is right below in the description, so please feel free to check out all the other incredible content our team creates. Second, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details are also in the description. Please give some love to the writer and the editors. They do just as much work, if not more, than I do. But that's it for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and have an amazing day. And as always, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and stay awesome. This has been Tim. Mustache out.